Okay, we've just got to the end of the week of live evidence of the undercover police officer Carlo Soracchi, who, using the cover name Carlo Neri, infiltrated the Socialist Party, well, actually, Socialist Workers' Party first, then the Socialist Party, as well as No Platform and other anti-fascist networks from about 2000 to 2006. It was all Carlo this week. I'm joined by a bunch of people to introduce themselves, starting with Bristle KRS. What did you make of him this week?
I thought it was a brilliant week of evidence just because it exposed him for trying to make all of his lies meet up and make sense. And it was transparent that nothing made any sense if you took him at face value.
Yeah. Kate and Ben?
Hello. Yep, I'm Kate. I had a relationship with Mark Kennedy and have been working with some of the women from Police Spies Out of Lives. Carlo Soracchi is known to have had relationships with at least 3 women while he was undercover, and he gave some quite horrible evidence about some of that over the course of the week.
I'm Ben, and amongst the officers employed on me was Jim Boyling. And I found last week particularly good in that I felt that well, for one, David Barr was back and really on form and having, massive improvement over previous CTI. And basically I felt that the inquiry really got to appreciate just the depths of the lies and the tangled web of deceit these officers are spinning, and I think they're kind of fed up with it now. I think they're really getting it.
Carolyn?
Hi, I'm Carolyn. I'm also a co-participant, and I was part of Reclaim the Streets, among other groups. And yeah, I really found myself enjoying parts of the questioning this week, which was quite unusual. But I think even from day one of Carlo being on the stand, it was obvious that he was twisting himself up, and a lot of his lies were going to come back and bite him quite severely.
And we've got a new guest this week. I'm not sure, currently a salesman suitcase. I don't know how you want to be referred to, but was there at the hearings all week?
Yes, I was. I managed to make it for 2 days, and very glad I was, in mixed sense of the word glad. But I was also at Donna McLean's day of evidence, and that was a much happier occasion. I think, and by the way, I'm a member of the public. I have no direct connection to UCPI or the core participants at all. I am very interested, however. I was very interested this week because it seems like every spy cop has their own stated way of approaching giving evidence. Some have got lofty disdain, and Carlo, HN104, as I'll prefer to call him, I don't think he's dignified to have a name. But Carlo is just groveling in his affect. He's 3 bags full to the chair, to David Barr, but that slipped. He was a profoundly contemptuous man and an empty man, I thought. But I imagine we'll get more into that as time goes on.
Yeah, like starting off with that, really. I mean, one thing we commented on, like in a lot of the videos I did during the breaks with other people who were at the hearings, was how this character he was trying to portray himself as like, I mean, some people, I referred to him as a simpleton. Other one says he was trying to pretend to be an honest fool. I mean, other people suggested he just really was that thick. I think I started the week thinking he was playing a role, but as the week went on, I think he might have just been that thick. What do other people think?
I'll jump in to give people. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Please go ahead.
No, I mean, I was just going to say it's very, very hard to tell, and I think, I mean, one of the things that I've heard commented about Mark Kennedy was just that he always came across as quite slow, but was presumably having to think on a lot of levels about which lies he'd told to who about what, and I think that probably does slow you down. But where I think there was just a lack of quick thinking on the part of Carlo was when he was caught out in lies, he would just keep repeating the same thing over and over again, and it looked more. I mean, the classic example comes from quite near the end of the evidence, where he was talking about the reasons why he lied to Operation Hearn under caution was that he had somehow been duped into thinking it was just a friendly chat, as though that made it okay to have lied under caution because the chairs were comfy or what have you. I do want to say, I'm not attempting to dignify Mr. Soracchi in any way, shape or form, but we had to fight quite hard to get the inquiry to use the name Carlo Soracchi. Yeah. People found his name out. We were not told it by the inquiry. People figured his name out and had to pressure the inquiry. And Carlo himself and I believe his family all pushed quite hard for his anonymity to be maintained, despite the fact that his name was already out in the public domain and that he had deceived at least 3 women into sexual relationships. And frankly, they had a right for his real identity to be publicly recognised. So I think it's quite important that we do call him Soracchi, and also that we pronounce it right, because I hear a lot of people saying Soracchi. That's not it. That's a hot sauce. And yeah, so it's Soracchi.
Yeah, I was really happy to see Soracchi trending on Twitter the week before he turned up to give evidence. And I think the more we can get his name out there, the better. I did think to myself that maybe he was acting a bit thick, but then the thing that made me think maybe he really is a bit thick was that he didn't seem to have prepared very well for the hearings. Like some of the other Spycops have obviously prepared and practiced harder, and he didn't seem to be very well prepared for what to me were very obviously questions he was going to be asked. He didn't have answers ready. He just had to keep saying, I don't recall. I think some of them have rehearsed better.
I think
and maybe read more of the evidence.
Somebody posted on Twitter photos of his tie along with a previous officer. I can't remember who that was. Jenna's tie. They're both wearing the same tie. I don't know if it's literally the same tie that they borrowed off their lawyers because they didn't have one, or if it has some kind of meaning. But it does suggest some kind of preparation for the hearings.
Yeah, it's in the style of a regimental tie. I mean, I tried to look it up, but I couldn't find one. But it did strike me as being, you know, that like provincial nightclub in the early 90s kind of tie that was in the bin that was, you know, presented to people who'd not dressed up enough to come to that particular establishment type effect, you know?
So are you suggesting it actually belongs to the Undercover Policing Inquiry and they make
I did wonder,
to wear it? The other thing that I think does suggest preparation that we've seen over and over again, and we saw again from Soracchi, was this tendency to respond, if she says that, I'm not going to dispute it, whilst at the same time often actually disputing it.
Yes.
So asked questions about, you know, specific and quite horrific things that he did in the relationships, including actually proposing to Donna McLean on New Year's Eve. Donna McLean, sorry. They clearly have been coached not to go on the witness stand and accuse the women that they abused of lying. So they always kind of frame any of their accusations that what is being said about them is untrue, or their pathetic claims that what is being said about them is untrue, with, if she says that, I don't dispute it. And then they dispute it. And then at the end, they will add, but if she says that, I won't dispute it. And that seems to be conscious preparation that they have all received. It's very noticeable in the undercover officer testimony.
Yeah, just on the tie thing. Yeah, I think he has. But just quickly on that tie thing, Bristol, I know you've done like some deep dives into it about the ties that they wore. I just wondered if you wanted to chip in on that.
Yeah, so I was bored, so I just went through all of the videos of all of the police witnesses to see whether there was the connection between the ties they were wearing, and mostly they were completely separate. But you got a sense of their style. But as part of that, I was looking into whether there was a singular Metropolitan Police special branch tie that would kind of be apparent as tying together some people. But investigations proved fruitless. But then I also think that if you were Metropolitan Police Special Branch Association, you probably wouldn't make that tie publicly available, much like some Masonic ties. So I think there's very much further inquiries required to clarify what's going on. But yeah, I completely agree with you, Tom, that it's got the look of a club tie. But
I suspect that information about the special branch tie is probably behind one of the many redactions in the documents that were being disclosed by the inquiry.
Actually, the black stripes on the tie are redactions.
Anyway, should we get back to the evidence?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is why I said... Oh.
Carolyn?
This is why I said I thought he hadn't prepared very well, because obviously they've been coached never to disagree with the women's evidence. But then why didn't he take the time to find out what the women's evidence was? Because they'd all turned up and given their evidence the week before. And either he didn't pay attention or just didn't bother trying to watch or hear or read up on what they'd said themselves. He says in his witness statement he hasn't even read Donna's entire book on the subject. And it's like, I don't know whether I believe that or not. Like, why would you... Somebody's just written a book essentially all about you and how you abused them. Wouldn't you, have a look at it before you turn up to give evidence in an inquiry?
I mean, just the audiobook at least. Yeah, I mean, it's available on audiobook. If he has trouble with reading, then there are ways around that. You could get a summary or something. I mean, I don't know if I believe that. I mean, I can't imagine being the sort of person who, like you say, there's a book that's ostensibly about you, and you don't even have any working knowledge of it. It's amazing. All right, just so we start. I mean, I'm not going to do this in chronological order as I have in previous weeks because it just takes so long. But I thought it was interesting, this document we saw right at the beginning, which was the scenarios that he was presented with on his training. And I think it's very telling, some of the scenarios, particularly this one of what he should do if he was invited, if a female activist invited him in after they give him a lift home, and he's like, oh, he would refuse, and I mean, but yet here we are. It turns out he didn't. I also want to point out that the font used in this, highly secret unit is Comic Sans, which is, I mean, a font that I kind of love because it's so hated. But I mean, it is quite impressive. The SDS has chosen to use it. Incredible, really. But yeah, I mean, just kind of talking about the way that he approached this evidence. I mean, there really was a massive lack of any sort of prep, and he really didn't keep to the script, which he'd obviously been told he had to do. But something he really did do was this thing we've seen from all the undercover officers. I mean, it's a big part of that thing we said about his name and about the fact we weren't allowed to release his name for so long. This exaggeration of perceived risk, and he really, I mean, that was essentially a hallmark of his entire deployment: the exaggeration of the perceived risk of the no platform, and the supposed high level of violence that was going on. Yet he had no evidence of any of, and by the end, we were really left with pure hearsay. And I mean, a lot of blaming of things on Mario, who was an anarchist member of No Platform, who's not a co-participant in the inquiry, and thus isn't represented by any lawyers who can push back on claims about him. But certainly, every person that he claimed had been violent, who has got a lawyer as part of the process, he had to admit that he had no evidence of any violence whatsoever. It was really quite startling, really. Does anybody want to sort of weigh in on that?
I mean, I think before we talk about the claims of violence that he was making. I think it's really important to flag what you just said about him making claims about somebody who is not in a position to refute them. Because going back to something that happened last week when Lindsay, one of the women that Carlo deceived into a sexual relationship, gave evidence, at the end of which Mitting made a point of saying that although she made some very good points about what he should be finding in his closing report, actually there's a whole load of secret evidence that Mitting has seen that unfortunately neither we nor the public are going to be able to see, and Mitting kind of suggests that maybe puts things in a different perspective. And I think we need to keep banging on about that point, because what that is unchallenged evidence. And what we see is that these officers are basically, as is the case with poor Mario, falling back on relying on the unchallenged and unchallengeable evidence to justify what they were doing, because any of the evidence that's been put into the public domain has just been so completely demolished. But yes, going back to what he actually said about Mario, that Mario had not been able to respond to.
You found that a lot, really. You found that a lot of the substantive evidence that was offered in the reports or the conversations given to the handler boiled down to pub chat, boiled down to, well, it didn't happen, but there was the potential of it happening, and that was a justifiable reason for recording it. And it's easy to forget, for someone like me, how weightless this all is. This is just admin for someone like Carlo Soracchi. It's how he spends his time before the pubs open, as far as he's concerned, because there's no weight to it, there's no value to it. It's just someone hearing someone saying something, and it gets put into a registry in the end. It's not the most evil thing he's capable of, but it does all tie together, and it is all of a piece.
It's interesting, particularly when we kind of look at the risk assessment that had been done about the undercover officers and whether they were likely to be on the receiving end of any sort of attacks should they be exposed after the deployment. And it was, the risk assessment was it was highly unlikely. He said he was not aware of that. But it was really interesting when you compared that with his reaction that he gave to Operation Hearn about Peter Francis having spoken to the press and exposed the existence of the unit. And that was very, very strong about kind of wanting to find them and sort them out. We saw a reaction from on Twitter, but there was I haven't got it in front of me, but a reaction from Peter Francis saying, come and get me, big boy, about that kind of thing. It's clear that there's very little risk for these officers, yet they're exaggerating this risk, but whilst also throwing out threats of their own. That whole area, it's a really common thing throughout so many of the deployments.
Yeah, the pub talk thing. Carlo specifically and lots of other officers repeatedly say they reported everything, and they didn't make decisions about whether or not they became intelligence reports. I just reported everything. Until the point that you point out the lack of reporting about something, and then their claims that they reported everything start to seem somewhat empty when it's convenient for them that they didn't report something and there's an absence of reporting. They clearly didn't report everything. They didn't report their relationships. They didn't report the relationships of other undercovers who they were coming into contact with necessarily. We certainly haven't seen much of that. And
they didn't report details, actually. It sounds odd to say it because, there's some really deeply personal bits of information about people's lives, but actually one of the things that I've really noticed over the course of the last couple of years, actually having to take allegations made by the police in this reporting and try to contrast them with reality is actually the sparsity of details. And I'm sure that David Barr will empathise with this. When you hear him questioning, you heard him questioning James Thompson about the supposed revenge attacks that were being planned after Hunt supporters ran down one of the Hunt saboteurs and attempted to kill them. You heard it. I mean, you heard it a little bit in relation to you around supposed incendiary device attacks in East London by the animal rights. Actually trying to get any specifics about those allegations in order to establish when they happened, where they happened, whether they even happened, and actually be able to prove whether or not the allegations made about any particular person or any particular group are true. It becomes very difficult because it's all so fucking vague. And you heard in the questioning of Carlo, we're talking about the violence in the groups he was infiltrating. There was a nice bit where he referred to weapons, and Barr kind of asked him to specify these weapons, and then it turned out to be weapon singular rather than weapons plural, and Barr continued to press, and eventually it turned out that somebody had a pen.
Well, the pen is mightier than the sword.
It is, but but yeah, so the hyperbole and the exaggeration and the extravagant claims made in a lot of the SDS reporting, and there we have the offending pen. You kind of, when you're doing this work of actually trying to examine what the STS officers did, and this goes for us in the evidence that we're trying to put together, but it also goes for the inquiry. I mean, this is basically their job, is they're trying to get to the truth of this, so they have to drill down into it and get specifics, and it's very rare. I mean, the pen is actually a rare example where we did get specifics. It was laughable specifics, but
there were specifics that weren't in the original report. That's the point. The original reports don't contain the information that would allow for cooperation. I wonder how much that is deliberate, because no one can actually check whether it's true or not, because you haven't said enough. Like, you haven't said who is doing this. You haven't said what the thing is, where they're keeping it, or you just haven't given enough information. It's so vague. Pub talk can't be corroborated.
The other thing I wanted to flag when we talked about the threat that these officers faced is just a bit of a plug for next week's evidence, because we're going to be hearing from the civilian witnesses from Globalised Resistance that Simon Wellings, HN104 spied on, and they actually did, to some extent, figure him out and kick him out of their group. So the reality of what happens to these officers, we've heard a bit about it in the past. I mean, we know that nothing has ever really happened to any of these officers when they've been caught, but the actual people who did find them out and the officer who was found out will be being interviewed over the next couple of weeks. So just a quick plug for that.
Yeah, I mean, like some of this pub talk, I mean, like just whether it's on screen now, the Harry Stanley campaign. And I mean, he's like when pressed on where he got the information from, he gave this whole like long-winded anecdote about meeting a lovely dog in a pub, and it was such a nice dog, and he played with the dog, and it turned out the bloke whose dog it was knew about the Harry Stanley campaign and told him a bit about it, and that turned into a report. And you're like, I mean, like, we really got this sense throughout his reporting that essentially his whole approach was to hang around in social settings and pick up chatter, and that was. I mean, that was his tactic. I mean, he got pretty blatant about that when he was asked, where do you get this information? He was like, well, mostly I just was at social settings and I reported what I heard people say. It wasn't for me to check if it was real or not. I just reported what people said. And I mean, that was such a theme throughout of so much of what he did. We'll get to it more in detail later, but I mean, in terms of like the relationships and like the social scene that he infiltrated quite deeply, I mean, this seemed to be all part of that. He had to make himself a credible character in these social settings much more than he was considering within the groups, just so that he could be around for any sort of idle gossip. Which, I mean, when he was pressed on, he said, well, you know, it was my job to report on public order situations, even if they were just imagined, even if they weren't real. Because people were talking about them, I was there to report on that. And that was the basis of my deployment.
And
it's
really important to the STS to be able to justify. You know, they need to have these reports in order to be able to justify their deployments. It's actually you know, they seemingly actually latch on to people who are basically mouthy when they're drunk, because that gives them stuff to report about in that vague. Sorry.
I just said we've got 44 people watching. Only 3 have liked. It makes a huge difference to the visibility of these things. If people could like, share this broadcast, please subscribe, all that sort of stuff. Also, someone has got their alerts on. If they could just turn their alerts off, it should be a really straightforward thing.
Sorry, that was me.
Yeah, it just okay. Cheers, thanks. But yeah, I mean, this whole thing about like kind of, you know, infiltrating like the social scene around activism rather than the activism itself. I mean, I think we're going to see this more and more as we go into the MPORU. I know other officers who had a similar sort of approach, but I think like Carlo is really like kind of a pure example of that. Does anybody else want to comment on that at all? Okay, there was quite a lot of reporting about trade union activity. And I mean, it started early on in his deployment, but it really kind of, it grew over time. And, you know, it appeared by the end, we got the sense that his, you know, the most impactful thing he did was this quite long report that he put in about the Socialist Party, you know, the role of Socialist Party members in trade unions, where he went through unions one by one and listed all the activity of the Socialist Party within that union that he was aware of. Now, we've heard from the very start, undercover officers say that, you know, industrial issues were not part of their remit whatsoever. And he repeatedly says, oh, I wasn't interested. But I mean, and we very much get the sense that he's not writing down anything. All of Carlo's reports, different undercover officers have different styles of delivering, doing their debriefs to their managers. We saw from Jason Bishop, he was writing things down, which were then being turned into reports. Peter Francis says he did the same thing, though we haven't seen any examples of it. But Carlo said, I just had chats, and then they decided what was written down or not. I never saw what was written down. But there was a lot of stuff on the trade union movement. He claims that was just legend building. It was part of his cover. The Socialist Party was full of people involved in trade unions, so he had to, almost like he had to report on it. But I think we're really seeing that it's a lie that there's no interest in the trade union movement.
I mean, of course it is a lot. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, you get to go. So fine, I'll come on after you. No crack, okay, you'll go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, of course it is a lie. And, you know, we know, I mean, part of this is links in with the stuff that we're not seeing around the role of the security services and generally the kind of, I mean, there's so much to unpack around the spying on trade unions and the blacklisting, and you know the key witness from the blacklist support group was not called to give evidence. His witness statement, Dave Smith, is now published on the inquiry website. I understand it's worth a read, but yeah, I think that this is one of those areas where they really don't want to look, and they don't want people to look, and it's it's not an area where I was particularly active. I think it's a shame we haven't got somebody here who's able to speak to that, because I think it is one of the more important things that the inquiry is not really talking about.
I just wanted to butt in and say, I'm sorry for talking over you, Kate. The thing about legend building was almost a reflex action with Carlo Soracchi. He talks about legend building the way you snatch your hand out of a fire. It's the first and last thing he thinks about. We'll probably come on to it later, but when he actually is confronted with a real legend, his attitude is an awful lot different. But insofar as spying on trades unions, I've been lurking ever since Tranche 1 Phase 3, and one thing I've learned is nothing is beneath the attention if it fills a report, whether it's the election of a Hackney anti-racist group, whether it's, I mean, time and again we've heard that things that you could just report on by turning up and attending ends up with a flourish in some report that ends up in a special branch registry. It's just the culture. Carlo Soracchi is specific in the way he's just a blank, but I don't see he's an outlier in some respects. He's a good example to use because there's a Latin phrase that translates to something like so and so pretends they're stupid because they are. That's how he strikes me. He wants to be clever and smart, but he just shows his arse over and over again. Oh, by the way, this is a really chatty microphone headset I'm using. I hope it's audible. Good luck.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, like just as an example of this, like kind of nothing too small. I mean, like it isn't actually. It's actually a public order situation in theory. You know, 3 people protesting at 3 mums from a nursery holding up a sign when Sherry Blair comes to visit. But I mean, you know, I mean, just the actual detail of what actually was going on and what actually is reported, and you know, the attitude of it when it was presented. I mean, this particular report got a huge laugh from the public gallery, and quite rightly too. Just you know, yeah, just such a minor event, which you know treated with such like seriousness. I mean, it was hilarious, really. Yeah, I mean, like he constantly like reported on very minor things, and you know, with very little basis of you know just literally things that he'd heard about in the pub. But he was very open about that. Like one of the things that was very different from him from other undercover officers is that when it came to talking about the discussions that existed in the safe house, the you know, hearing what other undercover officers were doing at the same time in the plenary sessions of the debriefs, he was a bit more open. I mean, he certainly he was still fairly guarded, but I think he let more slip than any of the other undercover officers in terms of what he was aware of, what other undercover officers were doing, about also the atmosphere that existed there. I mean, he talked about there being a lot of banter, and talked about the use of slurs being quite common, and it was like a jovial situation where everybody was looking to make jokes. And certainly when we see these write-ups that have all these in-jokes in them, he was like, oh yeah, you know, Bar put it to him, did this reflect the atmosphere in the unit generally? And he was, oh yes, it was a very jovial attitude with a lot of banter. Something that most undercover officers have denied. Does anybody want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think he was doing a lot of passing of the buck up the chain, and I'm really looking forward to the module with the managers now, because I think so many of the officers, Carlos especially, have been like deferring. I didn't write that. Yes, yeah, that's my intelligence, but those are not my words. The managers wrote that. So yeah, a lot of the blame has been passed up, and that's all obviously going to come up in the questions in that module, and it should be really, really interesting.
I think we're going to be very, very pushed for time in the managers module. There's 25 managers giving evidence over the course of 6 weeks. I don't know how they're planning on fitting it all in, frankly. We'll have to see, and whether it needs to go on to sit after the summer. But yes, I think there was a lot of that passing the buck. I think the legend building thing is an interesting one, because he really did kind of use it as an excuse for everything that he did that had quite clearly no possible conceivable policing purpose, was passed off as legend building. Everything he did that was potentially kind of a disciplinary offence was passed off as legend building, to the point where it sort of made me wonder, because I know that in Germany they have kind of different laws for what police officers are allowed to do to build their legend and what they're allowed to do when they're on their on actual deployment. And it did make me wonder whether there was some kind of discussion of that within the SDS that we haven't really seen, that gave him the idea that like legend building was an excuse for anything.
Do you mind if I just quickly jump in there to follow on from the point about passing the buck? This was on the 2nd, so I think that must have been the Monday. But towards the afternoon, in fact, in the afternoon, he said something like about source comments, because obviously source comments are sacrosanct and they're supposed to be verbatim. But he acknowledged it was a source comment, but he says, I didn't write the source comment. We'll see that sort of slipperiness later when we talk about the Operation Hearn stuff and how he ties himself in knots. But bureaucracy is just buck passing anyway. That's what it's good at. But this is exceptional behavior from someone who can't face up to what he did. Sorry. Oh, and I'll also say that every time I went to the loo at Juxon House during the inquiry, I was saying to myself, I'm just building my legend.
The legend building came up a lot over the trip to Venice, as an excuse, as the fact that he hadn't actually met anyone out there, or perhaps even hadn't arranged to meet anyone out there. The idea that somehow this all expenses paid romantic trip to Venice could be, just part of building up that legend, as he was that kind of guy. Again and again, legend building is an excuse for not actually doing intelligence gathering, but for hanging out in the pub or all those other activities which don't appear to have a gain in policing terms other than legend building for its own sake.
Just on the topic of this trip to Venice, let's. This was, in the afternoon of the first day, we got very much into the relationship with Lindsay, and one of the big things with that was a trip that he organised to take Lindsay to Venice for a romantic weekend. And we saw the authorizations that suggested this was somehow something to do with his deployment. And here's a clip of him talking about that.
You went to Venice with Lindsay on a trip. Did you provide the tickets?
I can't remember, sir.
Is it likely that you did?
Again, sir, I can't remember, possibly.
She says you did. Do you disagree?
No, sir. I don't disagree, but I don't agree. I can't remember.
You flew out together?
Again, I don't remember, sir.
Your idea?
I think I had been asked to go out there, sir, read some political stuff.
There were no other activists with you?
No, there was not a group. from memory, I believe I did meet somebody out there, but
Lindsay's recollection is that you didn't meet any activists whilst you were over there.
I definitely did on other occasions.
I'm only interested in this occasion.
Okay. On that occasion, I cannot remember. I don't think so.
Do you dispute the proposition that you flew out, just the two of you, to Venice?
No, I don't dispute that.
Socialist Party activists will travel to Italy. I'm not going to beat around the bush, Mr. Soracchi. Somebody is deceiving somebody. What did you tell DS Beals about who you were with?
Well, I don't know, sir. I was out there with an activist. You know, I'm not sure what I told him, really.
Did DS Beals know that this was a romantic trip for you and Lindsay?
I don't think so. Was I deceiving DS Beals at that time? I cannot remember. I'm sure at stages, of course I did.
This whole section. I mean, he was adamant that this trip was not a romantic trip. There was definitely something else to it. It was quite telling that this was the very end of the day, and I think that the Bar was intending to end on it, but Mitting wasn't having that.
SP activists on this trip were there. They were with you and Lindsay.
Yes, sir.
So what you've written in your inquiry written statement is untrue, isn't it?
No, sir, because, as I say, both myself and Lindsay were activists. We went out there, but what am I? I was asked to go out to try and meet people that might be like-minded and similar to us. And that's what I did. This was all part of the legend building that I was doing.
When you refer to Socialist Party activists to hold discussions with Italian activists of similar leanings,
Yes, sir.
who were the Socialist Party activists who were going to hold those discussions with Italian activists?
These were quite senior activists within the Socialist Party. What was called the...
Forgive me, in your witness statement, these are your words, the purpose was for Socialist Party activists, plural, to hold discussions with Italian activists
Yes.
of similar leanings.
Yes.
You are, as I understand it, one of the Socialist Party activists.
Yes, sir.
And what I want to know is, were there others, and if so, who they were?
These were not people that accompanied me. I went out there on their behalf.
So the purpose was for you,
Yes.
a single individual,
Yes.
to hold discussions with Italian activists
Yes.
on behalf of a number of Socialist Party
Yes.
activists, the others of whom, apart from yourself, remained in England.
Yes, indeed.
Did you make any contact with Italian Socialist Party activists or Italian activists of a similar frame of mind before you went?
I can't remember, sir, with this occasion, but I definitely did in my time there.
But on this occasion is what I'm concerned with.
I'm sorry, sir, I can't remember.
Did you meet any?
Yes, I'm sure we did.
No, on this occasion?
I'm sure we did, but I cannot say 100% categorically.
Lindsay has said categorically that you didn't.
Well, I'm afraid we will have a difference of opinion.
So your evidence is that you met one or more Italian activists in Venice on this trip.
As I say, sir, I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly.
I mean, it's hilarious, really. I mean, that's a bit of a supercut. It felt like it went on for a very long time of him just circularly going, or bringing up other trips, pretending that he was getting confused with which time they were on about. He did not credible.
In the course of that, he actually claimed to have gone on his own on behalf of the Socialist Party to Italy to meet with Italian activists as part of this incredibly important role he had as kind of Italian liaison for the Socialist Party. It was so. I'm looking forward to hearing from the Socialist Party, who will also have heard this evidence and will probably be wondering, who he spoke to on their behalf. And it's quite a big deal if it happened, but I suspect it did not.
One thing that wasn't asked was, did the Socialist Party, who had allegedly asked you to do this, did they pay your airfare as well? Were you double dipping on this? And the whole scenario is so shocking, and it's so intertwined with the deceiving women into relationship stuff, that the fact that he is spying on a political party and representing this political party and making connections for this political party kind of gets lost, and that it's a huge thing, and it's a thing which will come up again and again with other officers representing their targets overseas. It's just madness.
And I thought this was a so he actually thought this was a better thing to admit to and use as an excuse than the romantic trip in the first place, which is a lot more understandable.
Which was particularly bizarre, given the following day we got onto the trip to Bologna with Donna, where he was like, "Oh yes, I was deceiving my managers. It was a romantic trip," and he was purely for pleasure. Was what was put to him, which he agreed with. He went on quite a few trips to Italy, it would appear.
Do you think that his response to the trip to Bologna may have come from feedback at the end of the first day about just how bad it had looked, and how it would have been a lot less painful for everybody if, instead of claiming to have been systematically violating the Article 11 rights to freedom of association of an entire political party, he had instead just admitted that he'd gone on a bit of a romantic jolly? Because it's quite striking.
Yeah,
I wonder if somebody just kind of gave him a nudge that night and said, "Yeah, no, wasn't a good look."
I did predict that the next morning he would come back and give a clarification statement, as we've seen previous undercover officers do when that sort of thing happens, and outline that yes, it was a romantic trip. He didn't do that, but yeah, I think you're right. I think it was he had somebody was like, "Look, that don't use that line again. That looked awful. You look like a complete bellend." This wasn't the only trip to Italy he did, though. As well as this trip to another romantic trip to Bologna. He went. The big one, I guess, is going to Genoa for the G8, which we heard a bit about. Does some people want to talk about that?
This is another frustrating, guardrail that this inquiry has in place, that they are very, very reluctant to look outside the terms of reference,
except when it suits them.
Except when it suits them. So they absolutely can go outside the terms of reference, which are limited to England and Wales. But I feel on this occasion they really missed the point about why they needed to. So Carlo Soracchi was in Genoa. We're actually coming up to the 25th anniversary of the protests in Genoa this year. And he was present at the Diaz school, which was raided by police in something that has been described as a massacre, and ended up with massive court cases and criticisms of the Italian police's actions on that day. What's significant about this is that we know that Soracchi's evidence from Italy during the Genoa protests was going straight to the British government, and immediately after the Genoa school, the Diaz school raid, a member of the British government, I believe it was the Prime Minister, I might be wrong, came out and basically made a statement supporting the Italian police, saying that he was sure that they were doing a good job. And I felt that, I may have missed it, but I don't believe any probing questions were asked about what Mr. Soracchi witnessed in the Diaz school that morning. and or what he was feeding back about it, or how that contributed to a frankly shocking statement made by the British government in support of horrific human rights abuses abroad. And yeah, I don't think they really went there.
As I recall, Amnesty International described the incident as like the worst human rights abuses in a peacetime country or something along those lines. I mean, like very, very significant, and dragged on for years. The judicial process of trying to get some kind of outcome against the police abuses, which were kind of the state put walls in front of to prevent it from them being made accountable. Also,
yeah, it was
out that the authorizations for later officers, MPOAU officers, included the example of the public disorder and the death.
Death of Carlo Giuliani
as
on the streets of Genoa.
As part of the justification for deploying undercover officers into a social centre in the north of England, and while not pointing out who it was who killed him.
Yeah, it was also. I mean, it was quite frustrating that when he was being really pushed on his examples of violence that supposedly he'd witnessed his target group committing, the only example he could come up with Frank Smith, who he is. Let's be fair, he is smeared as a deeply, deeply violent man on a number of occasions throughout his reports. The only thing he came up with that he had thrown something, he wasn't sure what, at the police in Geneva. And he asked the chair, "Can I give an example of something outside of England and Wales?" Well, I think he said outside the UK, but as we know, it doesn't include Scotland, which is ridiculous. But and he was like, "Well," the meeting was like, "Well, it won't form any part of my recommendations, but you're welcome to say as you wish," which is kind of frustrating because I'm sure there's plenty of things we'd like to bring up that we don't mind if they don't end up in any of the recommendations that John Mitting pens at the end, but really need to be aired. But the fact that that there's a largesse provided for undercover officers to do that, but not for the questions that are being put to them, is yet another deeply frustrating part of the process.
Can I just interrupt? And this is a more general point, but whenever someone is targeted, say Mario, who is not part of the legal process, or Frank Smith, that they've done this or that violent activity, it's necessarily taken as being indicative of the group. But if a spy cop employs sexual coercion, or if they lies as a part of their undercover role, then we start talking about bad apples. It's incredibly insulting, and it's a paradigm case of one rule for me, one rule for thee, and it's so obvious and yet so deeply contemptible that it sometimes goes under the radar because it's so in your face, but I don't think it should be forgotten just because it's obvious. Sorry, I'll carry on.
Just on the, we saw a lot of his reporting about, kind of these events that were meant to be incredibly violent. We see his reports from the events that talk about some very extreme violence. He had to admit, like the example of the Bradford riots. He claimed to have he reported on a whole bunch of stuff, which he had to admit that he went nowhere near. In fact, he purposefully went nowhere near. He said, "Oh yeah, I made sure I was with Dan Gilman, Joe Batty, and Frank Smith because I knew they were much more sensible and wouldn't be getting into the violent confrontations the anarchists were. So I just waited till I was on the journey home in the same vehicle as them, and then heard their anecdotes from the day, and reported those back as if I'd seen them." Which this is a real hallmark of the way that he kind of does all his reporting.
And it was reminiscent of Jason Bishop last week, claiming to have been able to see through a building where he was being penned in by the police to the disorder that was occurring on the other side in order to report about it.
Carlo did that. Carlo did that about May Day 2001. You know, I mean, that was a really interesting one because he talked.
Yeah, no, it was Carlo, not Bishop.
Yeah. He talked at length about how, you know, that there was plans to attack the police, and then he was like, "What were these plans to be?" And he said, "Well, if they get in our way, we'll push through them." And he's like, "Well, they'll be pushing and shoving." It's like, "This is the plan to attack the police you're talking about in the report." And he's, "Oh yes, but you know, this is very serious." And then he said, "Oh, he was he was penned in," and that he said, "Oh, did you try and leave?" And he was like, "Well, I did some pushing and shoving to try and get out, but obviously that was important for my legend building. But I didn't witness any violence." So, like, within seconds of him talking about the serious violence towards police being pushing and shoving, he admits that he took part in pushing and shoving, and that he didn't consider that violence when he did it, or in fact when it actually happened anywhere else. But beforehand, he reported it as serious planned attacks on the police. I mean, just so we can hear it. Yeah, he claimed that he was inside the cordon. He also saw the serious incident that supposedly happened at Selfridges. Was it John Lewis? I forget where, but it was another side of the building.
It was around the back of John Lewis and Selfridges in that back street that runs parallel with Oxford Street. I think there was other Spycops there that day. But again, this whole lap doesn't get talked about.
Well, I mean, most significantly, this thing of obviously he became this character witness for the police defence. That's a character witness. He did an anonymous briefing to John Beggs, the solicitor who was representing the Met Police in the civil claim that was brought by Lois Austin and others who were kettled, which though the phrase wasn't used at the time, on May Day 2001. I mean, he claimed knowledge of all sorts of things that wouldn't have been possible to have knowledge of. I mean, he claimed he barely knew Lois Austin, yet he still went through with giving a character sort of a sketch of her to John Beggs. I didn't really believe the way that he talked. Like, he kind of acted as if he couldn't really help them, and they seemed disappointed that he couldn't really help them. That's not the impression you get from the notes that were made by John Beggs about the encounter.
Yeah, I mean, this is one similar to the incredible machinations that you see around who did what in the Ratcliffe miscarriage of justice, where, you know, Beggs is kind of saying, "Well, yes, I got a report. I got a briefing from them. I didn't really believe it. I met with him just to check whether the reporting was really right, and you know, his verbal report just kind of confirmed that it wasn't." It's interesting to read or to listen rather to Lois Austin's account of what she actually experienced when being cross-examined, because this is something that the briefing took place the night before she was cross-examined, and it focused on what would wind her up in the witness box, what could be used to discredit her in the witness box, and is really reflected in her memories of how that cross-examination went. And I think that gives you an idea of what really happened in that briefing. I think it's really significant that the Metropolitan Police were using these undercover officers in order to support their defence in civil claims made against the Metropolitan Police for abusive policing, specifically unlawful arrest, in this case, unlawful detainment. I mean, they kept people penned up, including Carlo Soracchi, for, I think, 7.5, 8 hours in Oxford Street. There's a report.
I think it's really important. That particular kettling is like the start of the kettling, or pretty much the start of the kettling, and the failure of that civil case fucked us all for years to come. Yeah. If that turns out to be a miscarriage of justice, which it certainly sounds like it, then I mean, what's the actual impact and consequences of that miscarriage?
I mean, I think there's been a few cases where kettling was used against groups of protesters before then, but it was much smaller groups. So I think even the Disabled Action Network got kettled in about 1995, for example. But this was the first time the police had done it against thousands of people all at once in such a high-profile way. And I think for anyone watching the inquiry, maybe for the first time, this gives a really clear glimpse into the way that the Metropolitan Police seek to influence court cases, judicial processes, with this sort of backdoor into the back of the judicial process. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who've been learning about this for the first time who are really shocked to hear about it. It really isn't a shock to people that have been on the hard end of policing for many years.
I definitely think that kettling is a cuddly label. It's a label that makes things less than they seem. But the kettling decision and the overturn of the review led to Ian Tomlinson's death. Kettling is violence. It's state violence without consequence. And by the way, John Beggs, as I think everyone here knows, was up for Barrister of the Year in about 2016, 15 or something like that. And there's a wider point that the SDS, the Met, it goes to the legal system. It goes to the system that instituted this inquiry. I mean, I certainly try and remember that, but it's like one of those underground system of fungus that you pick up a toadstool, you find out it's poisonous, you go 20 yards and find another toadstool. It's the same organism. Yeah, sorry, I'm babbling, but so I'll just mute.
No, I think it's really key, and I think this is the huge problem we have with the inquiry, and I think one of the reasons why the inquiry doesn't understand why we get quite so annoyed with their inconsistencies and their the difficulties we have with them, because we see it as all as linked, because it is all linked, and they seem to think, oh no, we're not, we're different from that, we're the inquiry, it's yeah, I mean, it is all very much linked, I think. But yeah, I mean, and also this stuff about, when we see stuff like this, and we see it as well with when we start seeing reports about the forward intelligence teams and the harassment, that, that the deployment of undercover officers into protest groups is not in a vacuum. That there's loads of, there's all these different types of repression of political organizing that were going on. And because it was coming, the same people who were getting stuck in the kettles were the same people who were getting infiltrated by undercover officers, were the same people who were getting, stalked by forward intelligence team officers, which were the same people that were getting bogus charges put against them, which are the same people who were getting visited at work. The build-up of pressure that was on a lot of the people who were, kind of really key to organizing stuff is the reason why a lot of people, we talk about burnout of activists as if it's some sort of you haven't been doing enough self-care. But I mean, the reality of the situation is that you have been under so much pressure, coordinated pressure from various different angles by the police, that no wonder people burnt out. And I mean, of course, one of the wonderful effects of burning people out is that undercover officers then are able to come along and take on their designated roles within groups, as we saw from Carlo Soracchi when he became things like the chief steward of the Socialist Party section of No Platform. Something we've seen from so many of the other undercover officers taking on positions of responsibility, often at times where the person who previously done it had, got burnt out by everything, and they're able to be in an ideal position to report on details, personal details of upcoming events. Though, as Carlo Soracchi said, as so many of the other undercover officers said, oh, I didn't do the job very well then, as if that absolves them. The fact that they were not very good at doing this responsibility that had been handed them by activists meant that they hadn't somehow been an agent provocateur in any way.
I think this is a really, really key point, that it goes back to, the fact that Carlo thought that it was better to claim that he'd been representing the Socialist Party in Italy than admit that he'd been on a romantic getaway. The general lack of understanding. I mean, this idea that if you take on a leadership role and then do it badly, that's okay because you're not. There's a total misunderstanding of, Article 10 and 11 rights essentially: the right to freedom of expression, the right to freedom of association, the right to politically organise, and the fact that, you know, what any state interference in that is a human rights violation. And what's really clear from all of the different ways that they fudge the evidence around this is that the police just don't have any real appreciation of the meaning of those rights and the significance of the ways that they're undermining them. And I think that's partly the fault of the press, because, you know, there really hasn't been anything like the coverage of the political interference that these policing units have been doing. And, you know, how it ties in with government, and you know, there's been some really significant evidence coming out about, you know, the ideological basis for what they were doing, and the political undermining of groups. I mean, we heard, going back to Boyling and Bishop, about how Reclaim the Streets was consciously policed out of existence, using a combination of intelligence-led policing, police harassment of people known to be leaders, targeting of print shops and the ability to get the message out, seizing publicity materials, and this just like coordinated effort. And it just really winds me up that this stuff, people are not appreciating the significance of the subversion of democracy that's going on with these units, and the undermining of people's ability to politically organize. And yeah, I think I'm boring about it. I go on about it all the time, but I feel like that it's the message that we're not getting out. I mean, I wonder whether the inquiry are going to pick up on it, really, because in his first interim report at the end of T1, Mitting said that, I can't remember the exact word, I need to go back and look it up, but he basically said that he wasn't even going to entertain the kind of tin hat conspiracy theories that some people had presented in their closing statements for T1, that this was somehow ideologically motivated policing. And it feels like that's a sort of unavoidable conclusion, having got to the end of the STS and having heard so much evidence about, you know, the political implications of what they were doing. But I wonder whether they see it.
They won't see it. They can I just butt in and say, Kate, you're the opposite of boring about this. It's a fundamental question, but it's a question that corporate institutions have spent billions on. I mean, I'm super interested in the history of corporate advertising and PR, say from the late 19th century all the way through to. And you've no idea how much money has been spent on fostering the idea that politics is clouds. You can look at them, you can point on them, you can have all the opinions you like about them, but they have nothing to do with you. The jobs you have are an act of nature, and they're nothing to do with you. And it's money well spent. It's money that goes towards people thinking, well, I've got my friends and family, I'll worry about them, but the big things are out of my reach. You'll notice that people in what was called the Third World don't think like that at all. They build strong, active public movements like Lavalas in Haiti. But we don't. We just suck on what we've come to accept. It's a shame, but I don't know how you can really build a mass movement without fighting against a huge amount of resource that's been devoted to this. Hopefully it can, and perhaps the next generation will do better than we have, but I'm not sure. Sorry, rambling again.
No, it's fine. Like just kind of going through kind of the next big topic that the inquiry asked Carlo about. We get to Donna, the second woman he deceived into a long-term intimate relationship there's a clip here which I'll just add, and we can have a bit of a chat about all that.
To what extent did the fact that Donna McLean was moving in the same circles as your target influence your decision to sleep with Donna McLean?
It did not come into it for me at that stage. I think I discovered that they no longer worked in the same environment together. It wasn't about that. I found her attractive, and I let myself down. I was, you know, a vulnerable stage in my life, and it just seemed like a good idea, really. Obviously, on reflection, I understand just quite how bad an idea that was.
It's okay. He realised it was a bad idea.
I have to say that watching these clips, I don't know if it's just how well they're edited, but I'm starting to revise my opinion on how thick he was. Like, these are really awkward clips to watch.
Do you remember, was it, I think it was Boyling said that the special branch was a cut above uniformed in like intellect and stuff. Is that panning out very well now?
I mean, it's something that
people
you've
said
heard
that
time
too.
and again. Yeah. Yeah,
I think even Andy Cole said it as well.
Yeah, yeah. And he saw himself as part of that, which, you know, I mean, like, Andy Cole's, I mean, very much an idiot's idea of an intellectual. I mean, we had we had a whole bunch of quite offensive comments, really, from Carlo. I mean, we must remember that they always have to say that there were genuine feelings, because it was the CPS decision that these undercover officers had genuine feelings for the women they deceived into sexual relationships was the reason why they weren't prosecuted for these relationships. So every single one of the undercover officers who deceived a woman into a sexual relationship has claimed that they loved these women. Is deeply offensive and clearly and in some cases completely out of context of everything else they've said about them. We've heard Jenna do it. We've heard Lambert do it. They've all done it. But Coles denies it, so he kind of sidestepped it. But for everybody else, it's like, yes, they were in love. So we heard from Carlo Soracchi that he loved both Lindsay and Donna McLean, which is, you know, like a deeply offensive thing to have to listen to your abuser like claim in a court.
Is this what you call witness coaching?
Yeah.
One thing I think you'll have a clip at some point that struck me was he appeared to also throw his legal advisors under the bus somewhat by constantly saying that his Hearn his response to the Hearn inquiry questions was on legal advice. It's basically saying that he'd lied because they told him to. And then he's directly asked about that, and he said, no, of course not.
Yeah, this is the whole thing about him being him denying the fact that he had sexual relationships with Lindsay or Donna McLean. Or he said he had no sexual relationships, and then he's like, "Oh, I had some, but they weren't connected. They weren't activists." And then he said, "Oh, but plenty of weary women." I mean, this dehumanizing language we see so much from him, which got a lot worse, I would say. The weary women were interested in him, but he didn't go anywhere near it. Which, yeah, and then, yeah, I've got the clip for that. I think this is the right clip. Let me just put it up.
To shove, I would have used her to bolster my legend, but I didn't.
Oh, sorry. Let me stop that. Hang on. Go on.
At one point, he also said, "Oh yeah, I had a thing with some anarchist women," like trying to shy away from the fact that both the women he had things with were connected to the Socialist Party and would describe themselves as socialists, and very much associated with his target groups. So, he tried to kind of obfuscate the fact that they were connected to the Socialist Party by calling them anarchists at one point.
Yeah, here's the clip.
Came to shove, I would have used her to bolster my legend, but I didn't have to use her. I do remember her name, but I do not wish to disclose it at this time. Is that meant to be a reference to Lindsay?
I can only think that it is, sir, but I as I say, I can't say for sure. I mean, again, some of the terminology I wouldn't have even used, but as I say, yeah.
Well, the truth was you had met Lindsay through your group because she was friends with them.
Yes, yes. However, I really did not realise her involvement in the political side for a while.
You are completely misleading the Hearn officers about the reality, aren't you?
I don't agree, sir. Again, this was another informal chat. I did not, we were talking.
I could have used her as a sap, but I didn't. We know full well that one of the benefits of your relationship with Lindsay is it did help to bolster your cover, didn't it?
Absolutely. And as I say, that term there, I just have never really used that word and wouldn't use it in that kind of context.
I did not target the girl. She was just in the pub and we started chatting. I did not use her for my SDS role. She never contacted me after the relationship finished. I had a year left of my operation after that. That bears no relationship to any of the three women that you've told us you've deceived.
No.
Was that pure fabrication or was there another woman?
There was not another woman, but again, I'm a little bit confused as to why that was written like that. I can't remember what we spoke about on that, as I say, so...
It's a lie, isn't it, Mr. Soracchi?
Well, I would disagree that it was a lie, but I don't remember.
I did snog a lot of weary women. I had to use what was around me. Can you help us first of all that over and above Lindsay, Donna McLean and your current partner, did you snog women who you met in your undercover identity?
No, I did not.
So can we take it that is a reference to Lindsay, Donna McLean and your current partner, or is it pure fiction?
Entirely. I'd say there's a hint of fiction there, and yes, a fiction, yes.
A hint of fiction or a complete fabrication?
Fiction. I did obviously snog, to use that word, weary women, again, their words.
When you say weary, their words, weary women, did you use the words weary women and then they wrote it down, or are you saying you didn't use those words?
Entirely possible, yes.
You would have used the words weary women because that was the parlance in the SDS, isn't it?
One of the nicknames for our target groups was wearies, yes.
The verb use. I had to use what was around me. What did you mean by that?
Again, I would take that to mean that whatever I was coming into contact with, I had to try and use it to my advantage.
Why are you referring to women as what was around me?
I can't say, sir. As I say, this was the conversation and the way you used to speak to each other at the time.
This is in full quotation marks. Can we take it that this phrase, these two sentences taken together, well illustrates your attitude to women?
Yes.
There were wearies who wanted relationships with me. One was an activist from Liverpool called Lindsay. She wasn't mega active. I saw her a number of times. We were flirty with each other. We were friendly, but nothing happened. That is a barefaced lie, isn't it?
Yes, sir. It's incorrect. So, yes.
A barefaced lie.
Yes, sir. I've said yes.
Another female activist, Donna. She was, we've redacted the employment. I don't think she was a party member. She was the other girl who took a shine to me. Nothing happened. Another barefaced lie.
Again, yes, reading that, yes, sir.
Socialist Party, Hannah Sell. She had a thing for me, but I never went near it. These people flirt, they have partners, the morals of the Wearies are not our morals. I went over the side, but I beat myself up about it every day. First of all, did Hannah Sell have a thing for you? If you don't know whether she had a thing for you.
Entirely. Would have been bigging myself up, sir.
But I never went near it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have said it like that. That's not the way I speak.
What does the it refer to?
Well, her, which is more the term I would have used.
The notice says the allegations are that whilst engaged in a covert role, I had intimate relationships with 3 females and that these took place without the knowledge of my line managers. If we go now to further down, we see that you say, I deny the allegations. And it goes on to say, on the 14th of September, I was shown by my solicitor a document entitled Operation Hearn, Written Questions for Operation Colton, and a document headed Disclosure Schedule, Operation Colton 2. I understand these documents were provided to my solicitor by DC, and we've anonymised the officer's name, of Operation Hearn as disclosure to enable me to consider whether or not to provide a written response. Other than denying the allegations, I do not intend to answer any questions regarding the matter at this time. You are positively denying that you had intimate relationships with 3 females and that they took place without the knowledge of your line managers, aren't you?
Yes.
You did have 3 intimate relationships with 3 females in your covert role, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
There were, therefore, no grounds to justify you positively denying these allegations, was there?
No, sir. I think this would have been, my federation or legal advice at the time, but no.
It's a false denial, isn't it?
Yes. However, as I say, I would have done this on advice because I think we were going to obviously make statements further down, but yes.
Did you enter this false denial because you knew that the MPS were not in a position to prove the allegations at that time?
I don't remember, sir. I don't think so. I would have been listening to advice.
If it wasn't for that reason, why did you enter a false denial?
I can't say. As I say, I think I would have acted on advice and it would have been taken from there.
The consequence of the lies that you told Operation Hearn, combined with your positive false denial of the truth in the disciplinary process, was that you escaped being disciplined, didn't you?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think I'm still subject to some kind of investigation, sir.
You escaped being disciplined back in 2016, didn't you, because you lied your way out of it?
Oh, no, sir, I disagree with that. As I say, I had informal conversations which I had no idea were then going to be written up.
You knew full well what you were signing, didn't you?
Oh, yes,
And you knew it was false, didn't you? Well, let me come to that. The consequence of you lying your way out of trouble in 2013, 2014 and 2016 was it has led to a delay in Lindsay and Donna McLean getting the answers that they deserve.
Yeah.
A delay of 9.5 years to date.
Yes.
And the 9.5 years since this denial, waiting for this inquiry to take its course, can't have been much fun for you either.
No, sir.
It's been hanging over your head for
absolutely.
9.5 years.
Yes, indeed, yes.
What would it have taken for you to have made a clean breast of things in a timely fashion?
I don't know, sir.
Can I take it from I don't know, sir, that there's nothing that could have been done that would have persuaded you truthfully to answer questions?
Much of the advice I received, sir, was obviously to wait for this public inquiry. Obviously, I would have liked this to have happened a lot sooner, but as I say, more than that, I cannot really offer.
Would have been far, far better if you'd told the truth. My learned friends can object to this question if they wish, but is it your evidence that your legal advisors told you to lie?
No, sir, of course not.
I mean, like, if we opened up by going, is he a simpleton or is he really that stupid? I mean, I think anybody who's watched, I mean, it's a bit of a long clip, but I think I'm glad we watched it all in full. I mean, he is, I mean, just honestly, I mean, like the levels of, I just thought it was an informal chat. I didn't think I was going to be held to account for the things that I said to a police officer. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous.
I mean, it's gobsmacking.
That clip had everything, didn't it? Absolutely everything. And that clip has some of the blaming his legal advice removed, I think. I don't think it's I think it's actually clipped for brevity, and it's still just like it's got it all.
It's the sort of thing you could watch over and over again to cheer yourself up.
Yeah, if all of the testimony was like that, I would be exhausted, actually, come to think of it. I mean, I don't think we could take that kind of for 8 hours.
It was one of those ones where, as I was tweeting along as it was happening, I just couldn't get it all in because there were so many zingers that were coming one after the other. And one thing you've clipped from there is that your Bar asking him 3 times, are you the kind of man who thinks that it is acceptable to lie in an informal conversation? Which he had to, admitted, he just had to admit he had no defense for at all. Yeah, I mean, it was just absolutely ridiculous.
I'm fairly sure he would have been under caution when he had that informal conversation.
But he's used to being part of the Spycops unit. The Spycops unit were used to having this total freedom to do whatever they wanted and never face any consequences. So he, I think, just thought that consequence-free life would follow him forevermore afterwards.
It's also worth pointing out for listeners who might not be aware that one of the reasons that his legal team might have said wait for the inquiry is that there is an undertaking from the Attorney General that these officers cannot be prosecuted on the basis of any information that they give to the inquiry. So by waiting till now to come clean, which he did very, very reluctantly over 3.5 days, there's no legal consequence. But had he come clean during earlier investigations by the police, then there may have been misconduct processes. So he escaped that, and him coming clean now is without any consequence apart from reputation, family, and friends.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wouldn't say. I mean, I'm not entirely sure how the Attorney General's undertaking works in practice. I don't know that Operation Colton has been entirely shut down. He did say he believes he's still under investigation, so that does still remain to be seen. I think it's also, the point about these people's families and friends and the people who they've been lying to for all this time, and particularly, the 9 years since the inquiry started, since Operation Hearn started, since these people had to start answering questions to their families and friends about what really happened while they were undercover. And it is, this is one of the theories as to why officers like Lambert, like Andy Coles, who are absolutely bang to rights, continue to lie about this stuff. It's sort of inexplicable, really. You kind of feel like, oh God, give it a rest, just let it go already. But of course they can't, because there's people in their lives. This is one of the things that the Category H barristers pointed out, is that at the time when they did these things, they were offered this alternative existence where, they basically believed that their families, their friends would never know who they had been undercover and would never know what they had done. And the women that they deceived would never know what had been done to them. And now, over the past decade, there's been this kind of coming together of those two worlds, and it must be incredibly difficult for them to manage.
One thing that I'll compare this to is the Post Office Horizon IT inquiry, where it's made very clear about the protection against self-recrimination that isn't here. But what I get more than anything else is the idea of the picture of Carlo Soracchi looking in a mirror to himself before the day of the inquiry, going through questions that he'll say to him that he'll be expected. Sorry,
he's going through his tie collection before
the tie collection is a question in itself that I'll be happy to park to one side, but he gives every impression of asking questions to himself in the mirror and being happy with himself. The ICPI equivalent of turning to the side and sucking in his gut and thinking, yeah, I'm fine. I'll be okay. I'll manage. Who could say anything against this? I'm presentable. And he's bumping up against hard reality, or at least the legal system, as he doesn't imagine it looks like.
He's bumping up against David Barr, because we've seen officers questioned recently who really did just get away with those kind of answers.
Yeah.
Again, I'm gonna see your David Barr, and I'm gonna raise you Sam Steen from the Post Office Horizon IT, because that's a steamroller you don't want to face. Paula Venables was left in tears after that.
Go on, Carolyn.
I was just left thinking about his family and the people that he has lied to for all these years, and obviously one of the reasons he tried to get anonymity in the first place was he had children who I believe are now young adults, and I'm sure they must be paying attention to this and having opinions about it. And it just does remind me that actually there's a load of his colleagues and former Spycops who have got away with this because they have still got anonymity. We're not even getting told what cover names they used. We're not even, in some cases this week, hearing what Hearn nominal numbers the Hearn inquiry gave them, which is ridiculous. And they're not being brought to this inquiry and asked any questions at all. And we should just remember this at all times, that only 50% of the Spycops are actually getting listed and asked for evidence in this inquiry. The rest are getting away, I hate this phrase, but scot-free.
What we haven't really addressed is the language that he used in his Hearn interviews, references to not going near it, and similar. And I think one of the things, Ben mentioned, the SDS in kind of experience of impunity, but like, I think we need to recognize that actually a lot has changed over the past 10 years since those interviews and disciplinary processes took place. And I've read some of the Hearn interviews where you get an idea of the questions that were asked and the way that they were asked. And I've also seen it in the IPT when officers were first asked to submit information to the lawyers. There is a reassurance there. Don't worry, this is just a friendly chat. We're going through the motions. There's a kind of chummy, that kind of, that culture that they're coming from is the same culture that was questioning them. And I think, we can't underestimate how much Sarah Everard and some of the other horrific revelations about misogyny in the police have shifted public opinion and have shifted the approach to this, so that there's a good chance that they could have got away with that.
I genuinely think that the generation coming after us will appreciate and employ the insights that you have provided in terms of how old Bill speak about people, how they categorize women, the misogyny they employ, because it's not accidental. It's structural. It's how they see the world. The crimes committed against people, the murders and other things are just the outcropping of the world they see. Sorry, I can't think I can make a complete point about this, but I genuinely believe that what the police are and what they represent are things that should be attacked, and should be targeted, that should be made a point of contention of.
No, I was just going to say, adding to the institutionally misogynist, which is kind of what we're seeing in those interviews with Carlo Soracchi. I just saw, scrolling past on the Twitter feed, I just saw Father Ted, I think, but before that, I saw a reference to Rent Book Gate.
Yes. Should we play the clip?
Yes, let's do Rent Book Gate.
I mean, just quickly about. I think this is something which had been inferred by previous undercover officers doing the same thing, but I think Carlo Soracchi with his simpleton approach really blew the head off it.
I just wanted to say I wanted to put this to Pet Shop Boys.
Sorry, go on.
I wanted to put this to the Pet Shop Boys. I love you. You pay my rent, but I
never did that in my life.
Don't know. You're showing your age.
Yeah.
That she was subletting. Did Donna McLean tell you that she was subletting the flat?
Yeah.
Who actually paid the rent?
I think we both did. As I say, the monies I paid her were rent and for bills and such like.
You said money you paid her. Can I take it from that your evidence is Donna McLean paid the landlord?
I believe so, yes.
Her evidence was that you were giving her between £150 and £200 per month in cash. Is that right?
I can't recall. I am pretty certain I was giving her more than that, sir.
Where did this booklet come from?
It was either given to me by the back office, because obviously we did have administrative staff that would go out and get things, that they said, we can give you cash to pay, but we do need some kind of evidence that if you fill it out, but you get it initialed, etc. So I don't know. That's what I did. As far as I can remember, I would fill out the bits.
She said that she'd never seen it before.
Entirely possible, yes.
Who wrote in the initials of the landlord?
That I do not know. I can completely confirm that everything sort of from the amount to the left is mine. I didn't recognise the initials and the initials of the landlord as my writing.
Can we be certain of one thing? Certainly not the real initials of the real landlord.
Again, I don't know, so I wouldn't have thought so, no.
Well, how could it be?
I just said I wouldn't have thought so, no.
If you look at the D. McL initials, who wrote those?
Wasn't me, sir. Well, as far as I remember, I never wrote anything there.
It's Donna McLean's evidence that it wasn't her.
Absolutely, I would accept that.
If you look carefully at the different initialing and look perhaps at the D varies quite a lot, doesn't it?
I'm not a handwriting expert, sir, but yes, I'm just looking at the one at the bottom and then going up, yeah.
If it wasn't Donna McLean and it wasn't you, who was it?
I don't know, sir.
Who are the candidates?
Well, I used to bring it into my back office, sir. But again, I would just go in, I would hand it in, and a couple of days later or later in the week, the following week, it would be handed back. It wasn't. For me, I did not consider it important.
The deposit, £685. Who wrote that in?
Well, as I said, that was me on that side of it.
How was that number decided upon?
I can't remember, sir. I think it would have been something that had been discussed between us.
When you see between us, between you and the back office, or between you and Donna McLean?
Between myself and Donna McLean.
Can I be clear exactly what is your recollection of the conversation you had with Donna McLean about the financial arrangement that was going to arise from your moving in with her?
I was going to contribute to half the rent, to any kind of utilities, and also add some in there for food and groceries, etc.
Can you recall whether you asked Donna McLean how much rent she was paying?
No, sir.
Her evidence is that she was paying £320 per month.
Okay.
Do you have any reason to dispute that figure?
No, I would not dispute that.
Were you trying to come up with a figure that would make it look as if this was a 2-bedroom flat and not a 1-bedroom flat?
No, sir. Don't think so.
And so your evidence is this book wasn't something you gave to managers, it was something managers gave to you.
This was what came up. They turned around and says, we need you to write down that you've paid this money. We see the rent book. You give it to us, we will do the rest.
Well, if we go back to the first page of this file,
yes, sir,
where it says rent collector,
yeah,
and it's got the landlord's name and then D. McLean, why is Donna McLean's name in the rent collector row?
I don't know. Couldn't think where to put it. I don't know.
Your evidence a moment ago was to the effect that Donna McLean was paying the rent. This book is completed as if Donna McLean is collecting the rent, isn't it?
Well, yeah, looking at those initials, yes, but as I say, I do not believe I was responsible for any of those initials. I have no recollection of that.
Is the truth that you were keeping from your managers that you were living with Donna McLean, and you made it look as if you were renting from her?
It's possible, sir, but as I say, I did not initial that side of the book. I was definitely keeping it from them. I think we've established that.
I'm exploring what you were keeping from them. You've been very clear you were keeping the sexual nature of the relationship from them. Were you keeping the fact that you were living with her from them?
Yes, I think that would be clear, yes.
The consequence of your doing that is you were receiving £685 per month of pay.
Yes, sir.
Which your managers thought was the rent for the property at Elgin Avenue.
Yes, sir.
It's very important you tell the truth, Mr. Soracchi. Is the truth that you are making a considerable profit?
No, sir, it's not.
Can we go back to the document, please?
Yes.
Where did it come from?
I cannot remember, sir, I'm sorry. It may have been given to me by my back office support staff. I don't recall buying it, but it could have...
Can you think of any legitimate reason why your back office should have given you a rent book, blank rent book?
Yes, sir. As I understood it, when I had spoken to my supervisors and we had discussed the whole cash aspect, I can't remember which inspector it was, but one of them had said, we need a written record. Doesn't matter who keeps it, you need to write out and fill in, and you need to hand it back to us on a regular basis, so that if the question is ever asked, we can say, well, this is what he has been getting given and being paid out.
So that, as you now remember it, either the rent book was given to you in blank by the back office,
yes, sir,
or on their suggestion you
yes,
got
sir.
it.
Absolutely. I can't see any other way that it would have been come into my possession.
Right. You have filled in, as I understand it, the name of the tenant.
Yes.
That's your handwriting.
Yes, sir.
And the date of the tenancy.
Yes, sir.
And the identities of the rent collector.
Yes, sir.
All your handwriting.
Yes, sir.
It's very clear he's absolutely fraudulently claiming a great deal more money than he was ever meant to be receiving. Just let's not forget these officers were the best paid members of the Met Police at the time and had a very generous expense account, as well as having what appears to be a whole bunch of extra money on the side. I mean, very clear this is fraud. And I think also very clear that John Mitting doesn't believe a fucking word of what he just said about it.
Yeah. Hashtag institutionally corrupt.
And again, the very good example of how he tries to pass the buck onto the back office or whatever, saying that they that this was like the way they did things. Well, maybe it was, but it's not looking good if it was. But most people were just asking for a receipt.
It's really not credible. I'm very aware how long we've been going on for, and one of the things about us not doing it chronologically was not to end up having. I mean, it's been 3 hours in previous times. We're only coming up to the 2 hour mark, so I guess we're doing better overall. But I mean, this is one of the the aspects of the deceptive relationship with Donna McLean that he really kind of he profited from on a personal basis. But I mean, he also used this relationship to profit on a professional basis, or attempted to at very least. As I said before, there was real parallels with the way that he kind of copied Bob Lambert's style, and I think that Bob Lambert did a similar thing to Belinda Harvey in terms of the rent, like a defrauding of rent. But I also did. Bob Lambert set up his own cell of the ALF in order to do a bombing campaign, and Carlo attempted to do a very similar thing with no platform. Let's have a quick look at a video about that.
Entitled Coded Bomb Threat Warnings. Steve Headley of No Platform has recently made it known to some activists who are close to him that he is aware of an authentic code word that can be given to the authorities when making bomb threats. What was the source of this?
Sorry, that wasn't the video I thought it was going to be. Just because we're running short on time, I won't play that video. But I mean, essentially, I was just going to want to talk really about the New Year's Eve 2002, the night where Carlo Soracchi proposes to Donna McClain, proposes marriage to Donna McClain, and proposes a firebombing attack to the members of No Platform, who are at a New Year's Eve party at the flat he shares with Donna. Quite significant. We've heard a lot about that particular evening from Donna, from Joe Batty, from Dan Gilman. It was also asked of Frank Smith, though we didn't see that that questioning. That was done in private. And Steve Headley as well. A significant event. Everybody's very clear that it was entirely Carlo Soracchi's plan. It was his suggestion. They told him that's not how they operate. Nothing actually ended up happening. Joe Batty's quite clear. He banged on the window. That was as far as it got. But Carlo Soracchi claims that, oh no, he started off saying that he had no idea about this whatsoever. Turns out in his written statement, he had referenced it, thought it was a different occasion, not New Year's Eve. Does anybody want to kind of come in on that? Nobody else wants to talk about it. Fair enough.
I do.
I was being polite.
I was being more polite. I think it comes under the general provision of anything that I can add that fills my quota for reporting. I don't think there was any salient addition that Carlo Soracchi could make. But I do think that he would just throw a shovel full of coal into the fire that allows him to, well, basically live the life that he wants to lead. Time and again, you find that Spycops are more comfortable in the company of activists. That's really where they want to be. And they'll do anything to just provide the limited and basic resource that they need to give to their bureaucratic institution to allow them to live the life that they want to. There's a very clear reason why Spycops were chosen to have family and wives, because the pull of a life of living in terms of something to aim for is attractive, and I don't think they had that as policemen, but I think they found that as undercover officers. And I think that there were barriers to stop them living a life that they were attracted to. Sorry, I haven't really thought this through.
I mean,
I'm
quite
strong.
wary of trying to understand these guys too much. I have to say.
No,
But what
that's true.
think we do see is later in the deployments, as these deployments come towards their end, you get this kind of unraveling. And we've seen it with quite a few officers, and part of that unraveling seems to be this kind of pushing towards more criminal conversations. So
I'd say, yeah, you say unraveling. I'd almost say that this is a shifting of sacred values from the status quo to something larger and more interesting and more important than themselves.
I think they're
it's a tension. I grant you that.
I think they're just seeing the end of their deployment coming up, and they realize that they can no longer justify it with the kind of intelligence that they've been providing, and they need to up the stakes in order for their deployment to seem important enough to be kept in, even though they're reaching what I would call their sell by date or use by date or whatever. These deployments were supposed to last 4, maximum 5 years. And as you get towards that time, we're talking, I believe, 2004, when he starts talking about the bombing. He's been in for 4 years. We see exactly the same thing with James Thompson. We will be seeing the same sort of thing with Mark Kennedy. We saw it quite dramatically with Bob Lambert, that there is... I see it as a kind of unraveling. It's a kind of desperation where the reality of their police existence is about to start encroaching on the reality of their undercover existence, and they need to justify their undercover existence more.
I absolutely agree. I don't think that people in general are transactional. I don't think that they think that if I give this, I get that in return. I think that people live under. I think that people live under an idea of sacred values, and I think it's important to believe that in this instance, undercover operatives might see sacred values larger than themselves, and I think that this is a genuine genuine state of argument.
I got to say, I'm a bit skeptical of that whole line. I think it's very clear that, by this point, what Carlo Soracchi has been able to report on in terms of direct links to serious violence criminality has been very, very thin. And as he is coming to the end of his deployment, he's looking around him to seeing what other very, very successful undercover officers have been able to report on, and has thought, if I could engineer a situation where there is something which is much more serious happens on my watch, my deployment will be considered a lot more successful. And I think that I really think we shouldn't lose sight of the parallels of Bob Lambert and the fact that he was considered this legend because of the way that he was able to have this big collar around the incendiary device attacks. That, as far as Soracchi's concerned, it's like, if I could copy that, I'd be a really good boy. And I think that the fact that he had the knowledge around Roberto Ferrere and it was something he was able to talk about, I think gave him a sense of confidence to kind of push forward. This is something that he hoped his target group would take on and get involved with, particularly whilst they were all drunk. I think it's something which this. I think there's a parallels again with James Thompson and the Operation Line, this whole thing of going to the south of France. I don't know if anybody else wants to come in on that.
I mean, one of the things with that kind of ramping up to the the whole trying to engage people in a conspiracy for arson is that for his entire tour, he knows that he can supply gossip to his bosses. They'll sign everything off. He's getting paid, even though the paperwork's clearly fraudulent. And there's kind of like an understanding that he can get away with it. There's been no checks, no balances, no supervision. That he's provided exactly what he was asked to provide, and he knows that a lot of it is just piss and vinegar. He's not supplying good intelligence. He's supplying what he knows his managers want to hear. So just towards the end of his tour, just going that little bit further, he knows that he can get away with it. I think that's the issue, is that as long as he's providing what his managers want to hear, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. That's the self-perpetuating cycle that he's part of. He's not a smart man. He's a cunning man, but he recognizes his place in the structure, in the hierarchy. He has to turn in these little tidbits that demonstrate that the people they're spying on are dangerous, violent, and that there's some probable plot on the horizon. As long as he's turning in information on that, whether it's real or imagined, then everyone's happy. I think that's what it comes down to with the Fiore issue, is that you don't need any actual tangible evidence. He knows it's not going to go to a trial or anything like that. He just has to report something like that, and he's going to get a pat on the back, like all of his previous colleagues have got their OCU commander commendations for basically turning in tittle tattle.
The bomb threat code word is a good example of that. It's got no basis at all, as he kind of recounts it under questioning from Barr, and yet it basically attached a terrorist association to somebody in his reporting, with no basis, and obviously potentially quite serious consequences. But for him, he's put himself in proximity with something scary, dangerous, criminal sounding, at no cost.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to kind of get into his whole sort of exfiltration. I'm aware we've been over 2 hours now. Just get into some stuff about his exfiltration, and this incredibly, so many of the undercover officers have really used trauma as a means of, empathetic bonding, weaponizing empathy, but also laying the groundwork for why they had to leave and never be contacted again. And he uses, I think, was probably one of the most distasteful invented stories. He claims that his father has died. He claims that at the funeral, his sister comes forward, his supposedly long-time depressed sister comes forward and says that she was raped multiple times. He gives very graphic detail of the rapes that his sister has received at the hands of his father. And this sends him into a spiral that means that he breaks up with Donna. He's very different towards her. And very distant, has to go to Italy a lot to sort that out, distances himself from a member of his group, and swears to secrecy, both Donna and Joe Batty, on this topic, whilst talking to them at length, getting counselling and emotional support from both these individuals around what, if it was real, would be one of the most horrific things that anybody could ever find out about their own family. Deeply disturbing. I mean, something which Donna highlighted as being the most cruel, she called it evil, manipulations that he engaged in throughout the entire time that he was deployed. An incredibly disturbing tactic, which, like I say, other undercover cops have done, but I don't think we've heard anything quite as bad as what Soracchi kind of invented. Does anybody want to comment on that? I mean, it's interesting because, I think it ties back to something that he claims, that the death of his mother, which was real, which did happen during his deployment, should have been the time when his bosses should have pulled him out from the field. And he's like, look, I mean, he says that, he went in for a meeting and they said to him, look, are you going to be okay? You're clearly very distressed by the death of your mother. And he's like, oh, I'll be absolutely fine. Really keen to get back into the field, really keen to carry on with the job, with the role. And he's saying that, he thought he would have fought it, but really they should have withdrawn him then. But, it's put to him that like he wouldn't have had it at the time. Because it's obviously very clear that like it's so financially rewarding being an undercover officer, as well as having this whole ability to live this other life. That like so many of the undercover officers, he was desperate to continue the deployment, regardless of his emotional state.
For someone who's helped people who have been abused by their fathers, this is the crime against crimes. To pretend to build your... I don't know. But to say that this is part of your narrative, that you have to live with this, is sickening and obscene. And to be able to talk to your father after this, because we learn later on that he moved to North London and he moved in and he chatted with him, is there are no words to describe it. And there really is nothing to say except that Carlo Soracchi deserves to be in the lowest circle of hell.
I think
There's
the
no
term
other
that
way of
was
putting
used
it.
was weaponizing empathy, which I think came
It
up.
goes
in
beyond
this
that. Weaponizing empathy is a legitimate thing, and it's something you can apply to people. But to say that a member of your family did the lowest, most evil thing to another member of your family it breaks all the bounds. It puts you outside of everything that's decent if you're using it to bolster your narrative, to building your legend. You can't say enough how much Carlo Soracchi deserves to be encased in ice in the lowest circle of hell.
Yeah, really gross, but I think very effective way of this tactic of getting people to like be sworn to secrecy, to give this sense that when then you do disappear and then people ask after you, go like, oh, he's got some really serious issues going on. Yeah, I'm sure he's been very poor at staying in touch with people, but it's totally understandable. I can't say any more. Leave him alone. He's having a hard time. And I think this sort of thing is like kind of, this is what so many of the undercover officers did, and that kind of wrote into their exfiltration tactic. Yeah, I think that's like a key part of like the way in which they operated.
And again, he didn't own this. He turned it around and said that like he changed the story. He changed the he changed the claim of abuse to physical abuse. Why is he now needing to lessen it? It was like he recognized that he had gone too far and beyond the pale. So I changed my lie to a different lie at this stage.
I think it's important also to recognise that Soracchi was working at a time where there was greater understanding of the importance of psychological trauma and considering those aspects. He underwent psychometric testing with Felicity Gibbling at the very start of the recruitment process. He was having appointments with Dr. Palmer, who's an eminent mental health specialist working with forces trauma victims. So he himself and his management were aware of the effect that it would have on members of the SDST. So for him to, in concert with his managers, use those themes against the people that he was spying on towards the end as a theatrical exfiltration tactic, I think again that speaks to the cruelty and the intended effect of using those sorts of tactics. It wasn't a casual, unexpected thing. It was an intentionally cruel and violent act.
Yeah, absolutely. Towards the end of his deployment, we see a reduction in his reporting. But one of the things that really comes out in the assessment of his deployment was that he'd been very successful in disruption. This is something that he denies was considered like a attack, like something he was meant to be doing. But we saw a number of references about how he had successfully prevented no platform from physically attacking the far right. That the group, when we talk about the group falling apart, it's like very much the credit is given to Soracchi for causing that to happen. And there's sort of a belief that this is a successful deployment because of the disruptive elements of his deployment, which is something that, you know, throughout we've heard undercover officers like deny that that was what they were there to do. But I think that everybody who's had an experience of an undercover officer would say that very much disruption was part of the experience. And that's something which kind of came through. And he denied it when it was brought up in some official documents, said he'd never seen it before, wasn't his words, all the usual things we're used to hearing. But I think it was clear that disruption as a tactic was part of it. We're on 2 hours, 10 minutes now. There's a huge amount of stuff that we obviously used 4 days of questioning. But is there anything, if we just do a quick go round of other topics that maybe people want to pick up on before we come to an end? Bristle, do you want to start? If there's anything else you'd like us to sort of comment on?
Mainly just that he was a bit of a Mark Jenner mini-me. The mentoring relationship clearly came through with elements of tradecraft, some of the top tips that Jenner clearly passed his way, and the way that he executed his deployment. I wouldn't want to get stuck on pathologizing individual Spycops, but the patterns of behavior across them, I think, can be very instructive in terms of what the effect is that they're aiming to have. These things aren't just in a vacuum. They're being done for a particular reason. I think it's important to look at those tactics and why they're shared across different deployments by seemingly different undercover cops.
Carolyn, did you have anything you wanted to pick up on?
I'm not sure if my internet's going to let me speak. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, fine, go for it.
I don't know. Can you hear me? Oh, right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, great.
Yeah, absolutely fine.
I just want to say there was one thing that Carlo said was David Barr actually asked him directly, like he asked all the Spycops, is there anything that could have been done that would have stopped you from behaving like this, or is this kind of misconduct or whatever? And in terms of the sexual relationships, he was asked, you know, if there was a specific criminal offence, would you still have had the sexual relationships? And Carlo said, oh no, definitely not. But then at the same time, we heard repeated instances throughout his evidence of there being very specific guidance from Michael Dell, his manager in the Spycops unit, not to do certain things, and him just ignoring that and going ahead anyway. So Michael Dell supposedly told all the Spycops, look, no more sexual relationships. If you're having one, it's going to finish. This is not acceptable behaviour. And Carlo admitted that he just ignored this. So I'm not sure why we're meant to believe that if it was a criminal offence, he would have paid more attention, because he's already admitted to other criminal offences, whether it's the rent book fraud or whatever else that he's done. So I'm kind of that's one thing I've been left wondering about ever since we heard him. And we'll probably never know the truth.
Also worth pointing out that it was possible to authorise these officers to participate in crime. So had it been a criminal offence, one assumes that they could have been given authority to ignore that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
absolutely. Anything else you wanted to pick up on, Ben? Or Kate, if she's still with you?
Kate is not. I think she's rushing into the room to have her last words. I was going to give a nod to the interesting few weeks we have ahead of us.
Yeah, one of the things that I think we haven't touched on is the rumour about HN67. This is something
Alan Bond.
Alan Bond, yes, apparently also fathered a child whilst undercover. Very little is known about this, but it comes from Carlo Soracchi having told either Hearn or someone in the course of the many interviews that he's given over the last 9 years, whilst people have tried to investigate this wrongdoing, that he had heard a rumour that Alan Bond had fathered a child. I was kind of expecting him to just roll back on this and say, I don't remember, I never said that, it wasn't me, Gov, like he did with so many other things. He actually sort of doubled down and said, yes, I did hear this. He claims to have heard it at a party, and there was much merriment around this topic. Everyone thought it was hilariously funny. And the impression that I got, he referred to himself in that conversation as a bit of a junior officer. He'd been undercover for quite a long time at that point. So the impression I got was that this was fairly senior officers in the SDS, you know, managers, laughing about the fact that HN67 Alan Bond, aka Richard from True Spies, if you get around to watching the True Spies, it's an entertaining watch. Anyway, yeah, that this was something, and you got a kind of glimpse of that banter and that culture that most of the officers are very, very reluctant to speak about. But so apart from the horrific news that there is likely to be another SDS child out there, there's the way that news was treated by the SDS and the descriptions of it that Carlo Soracchi gave, which I found quite striking. Did you want to talk about next week?
No.
Yeah. So salesman suitcase. I'm still not sure what to call you. Anything else you'd like to pick up on that we haven't covered? Yeah, fair enough. Well, look, it's been quite a hell of a week. We've had a lot of pretty intense topics brought up by the undercover officer Carlo Soracchi. But as ever with the Undercover Policing Inquiry, that is not the end. It rolls on. We'll be back again next week, starting tomorrow with Guy Taylor, one of the first of the witnesses who was spied on by the undercover officer Simon Wellings, HN104. We'll have a full week of civilian witnesses, followed on Tuesday with Chris Nynham, and then on Wednesday, Noel Douglas and MT. Then on Thursday, Patricia Amina de Silva, who is the cousin of John Charles de Mendes, who was fatally murdered by the Met Police in a supposed case of mistaken identity. We did see some reporting on the campaign by Carlo Soracchi. I don't know if there's going to be more undercover reporting on that family campaign. Yeah, please tune into that. I'll be doing the usual videos during the breaks, live updates on Twitter as I go. At least I hope to be. I am in trouble with the inquiry again. Previously, I have dealt with these problems with the inquiry myself. I've decided to sub that out to my lawyers, as anybody else would have done ages ago, probably. So they're currently zinging back and forth very long letters. Certainly in the past, we have named some of the inquiry legal team who have been very obstinate in kind of the way in which the coverage has gone, very difficult to deal with. They've asked that we stop doing that, and out of a sense of trying to get back to a good relationship with the inquiry legal team, which previously used to be the case before this tranche, I've agreed to stop naming members of staff on the streams. Obviously, I can't stop anybody else doing that, but I'll be editing out if anybody decides to. But yeah, so we'll see you again then next week. Ben, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just wanted to add that when the civilian witnesses who will be kind of preceding Simon Wellings are from the early part of his deployment, and the inquiry has not seen fit to grant core participant status to Dissent Network, for example, who features as a good third or half of his remaining deployment. So yes, we'll be hearing hopefully a lot of stuff, questions to him about stuff which there isn't a civilian witness who has been able to give evidence about, which is written or oral, which is another example of how shit the inquiry is.
Yeah, I think I'm one of the very few anarchists who has any memory of Simon Wellings at all, which is kind of weird because I didn't think I thought, oh, I just met him once in passing, but it appears that's quite a lot compared to everybody else.
Yes, he may well be an example of an actual example of a what was the term used? A unremarkable deployment, but we shall see how that unfolds.
Okay, thanks for joining us, everyone. As ever, you can find out more about all this stuff at spycops.info, which will give you links to all the campaign groups who are working around this issue. If you want to follow things as they happen, just check out the hashtag Spycops on whatever social media platform you prefer. It's most active on Twitter, which these days is called X, but other platforms are available as well. Please get in touch if you've got any questions or you'd like us to speak on any particular issue. I'll see you all next week, starting Monday morning. We'll do a preview video before the hearings start at 10 a.m. So look out for it about sort of 20 to 10 in the morning. Unless anybody else has got anything else they want to add, we'll see you all for Monday. Bye for now.